One night, my son invited me to dinner. When I arrived, there was an extra place set at the table for my husband who had died 2 years ago. When I asked why, my son turned pale and said, "Mom, there's something we never told you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from." The invitation came on a Tuesday. "Mom, come for dinner Friday night. Just family, nothing fancy." My son Michael's voice on the phone carried that careful tone he'd developed since his father died. The one that treated me like fine china that might crack at any moment. I was 63 years old, not ancient, and certainly not fragile. But grief has a way of making people around you walk on eggshells. "I'd love to," I told him, and I meant it. The farmhouse where Robert and I had raised our children felt cavernous these days, filled with 40 years of memories and the particular silence that comes after a long marriage ends. Not with divorce or anger, but with a heart attack on a Wednesday morning while he was checking the fence line in the north pasture. 2 years had passed since that morning. 2 years since I'd found him there, face down in the tall grass, his work gloves still on his hands. I arrived at Michael's house at 6:30, carrying a pie I'd baked that afternoon. Apple, because it was his favorite, and because keeping my hands busy stopped them from shaking. The house was a modest colonial in a quiet neighborhood of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, the kind of place where families put down roots and children played in sprinklers on summer lawns. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, answered the door. She'd always been beautiful in that careful, maintained way. Highlighted hair, expensive athleisure wear, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Brittany," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You shouldn't have. We have dessert." "I wanted to," I said simply, handing her the pie. The house smelled of roasted chicken and something else, something I couldn't quite place. A cologne, maybe, or aftershave. It tugged at something in my memory, but the thought slipped away before I could catch it. "Where's Emma?" I asked, looking for my granddaughter. "Sleepover at Madison's house," Vanessa said. "We thought it would be nice, just the adults tonight." Something in her tone made me pause, but Michael appeared from the kitchen before I could analyze it, wiping his hands on a dishcloth. "Mom, you made it." He hugged me, and I felt the tension in his shoulders, the way he held me just a beat too long. "Of course I made it," I said, pulling back to study his face. "Are you feeling all right? You look tired." "Work's been crazy," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Come on, let's eat. Everything's ready." The dining room table was set with Vanessa's good china, the set her mother had given them, cream-colored with gold trim. Candles flickered in crystal holders. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. It was lovely and formal, and completely unlike the casual family dinners we usually shared. And then, I saw it. 4 place settings, 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, 4 wine glasses catching the candlelight. But there were only 3 of us. The 4th place was set at the head of the table, Robert's place, the position he'd always occupied in our own home, the seat of the patriarch, the father, the man who was supposed to guide and protect his family. My breath caught in my throat. "Michael?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Why are there 4 places?" He turned pale. Actually pale, the color draining from his face like someone had opened a tap. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment, nobody spoke. The classical music continued its pleasant meandering, completely at odds with the sudden tension that filled the room like smoke. "Michael," I said again, more firmly this time. "What's going on?" He exchanged a look with Vanessa, one of those married couple looks that communicates volumes in a glance. She gave a tiny shake of her head, but he straightened his shoulders like a man preparing to jump into cold water. "Mom," he said slowly, carefully, "there's something we never told you." The room tilted slightly. I reached for the back of a chair to steady myself. "About your father?" "Please, sit down," Vanessa said, her voice gentler than I'd heard it in months. "This is going to be difficult." I sat, but not in my usual place. I chose the chair closest to the door, some instinct making me want an exit nearby. "Tell me." Michael sat across from me, his hands flat on the table like he was trying to anchor himself. "Dad didn't die the way you think he did. He had a heart attack." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. distant and hollow. In the north pasture, Dr. Morrison said it was massive, instantaneous. He wouldn't have suffered. That's true, Michael said. But there's more. Mom, in the months before he died, he was investigating something that scared him. I stared at my son, this man I'd given birth to 36 years ago, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged and whose nightmares I'd soothed. What are you talking about? Vanessa stood abruptly. I'll get the box. What box? I asked. But she was already gone, her heels clicking rapidly across the hardwood floor. Michael rubbed his face with both hands. A few weeks before he died, Dad came to me. He was agitated, more worried than I'd ever seen him. He gave me a box, a locked box, and made me promise to keep it safe. He said if anything happened to him, I should wait 2 years and then I should tell you. 2 years, I repeated numbly. Why 2 years? He said you'd need time to grieve first, time to be strong enough to handle what was inside. Vanessa returned carrying a small wooden box, maybe 8 inches square, with brass corners and a keyhole in the front. She set it on the table between us with a soft thunk. I recognized it immediately. Robert's tackle box, the one his father had made for him 50 years ago, carved from walnut with their initials intertwined on the lid. R.C. plus J.C. Robert Caldwell and James Caldwell. This was in the basement, I said. I saw it down there last month when I was looking for the Christmas decorations. No, Michael said quietly. That was a different box. Dad made a replica, same wood, same design, to leave in its place. He didn't want you to know this one was gone. My husband had deceived me. The man I'd slept beside for 41 years. The man I'd trusted with my life, my heart, my future. He'd hidden things from me. Created false boxes to cover his tracks. Open it, I said. Mom, are you sure you're ready? Open it. Michael produced a small brass key from his pocket. His hands shook as he inserted it into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the lid lifted with a soft creak. Inside, the box was divided into compartments lined with red velvet, like a jeweler's display case. But instead of jewelry, it held documents, photographs, and on top of everything, a letter in Robert's handwriting. My name written across the envelope in his familiar scrawl. Brittany, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the lies. But most of all, I'm sorry for what you're about to discover. Our life together was real. My love for you was real. But my past was someone else's entirely. Burn everything in this box after you've read it. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't let them know you know. Your life may depend on it. R. My hands trembled as I set the letter down. What does this mean? Who are they? Michael's face was drawn, aged beyond his years in the candlelight. I don't know, Mom. Dad never told me. He just said that when the 2 years were up, you'd need to know the truth. About who he really was before he came to Millbrook. About why he never talked about his family. About the money. What money? Vanessa pulled a photograph from the box and slid it across the table. It showed a young man in his 20s, handsome and smiling, standing in front of a mansion I didn't recognize. He wore an expensive suit and had his arm around a beautiful woman in pearls. The young man was Robert, but he looked different. His hair styled differently, his expression more arrogant, his entire bearing that of someone from a world I'd never known. Who is that woman? I whispered. We don't know, Michael said, but look at the date on the back. I flipped the photo over. Written in faded ink. Newport, July 1982. July 1982. The month before Robert had arrived in Millbrook, 43 years ago, driving a beat-up truck and looking for farm work. The month before he'd walked into Harrigan's Diner where I was waitressing and ordered coffee and pie and asked if I knew anyone who was hiring. The month before our life together had begun. There's more, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. He pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping, the paper so old it crackled in his fingers. The headline read, Prominent Boston family heir missing, foul play suspected. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The photograph accompanying the article showed the same young man from the other photo. But the name beneath it wasn't Robert Caldwell. It was James Whitmore III. "Mom," Michael said, and I heard the fear in his voice. "I think Dad was running from something. Or someone. And I think—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I think whoever he was running from might have found him." The doorbell rang. We all froze. The sound echoed through the house, jarring and wrong in the sudden silence. Vanessa's face went white. "We're not expecting anyone," she whispered. Michael stood slowly, moving toward the window. He lifted the edge of the curtain and peered out. When he turned back to us, his expression confirmed my worst fears. "There's a car in the driveway. Black sedan, tinted windows. 2 men in suits just got out." The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more insistent. "Don't answer it," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, hard, nothing like the gentle widow everyone thought they knew. "Michael, is there a back door?" "Mom, what are you—" "Is there a back door?" I repeated, louder now. "Yes, through the kitchen." I grabbed the box, shoving Robert's letter into my purse along with the photograph and the newspaper clipping. My hands moved with a certainty that surprised me. Muscle memory from a life I'd forgotten I'd lived, or maybe never knew I had. "Brittany, you can't just—" Vanessa started, but I cut her off. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, looking at both of them. "You're going to answer that door in exactly 30 seconds. You're going to tell them I left an hour ago. You're going to act natural, surprised they're here, confused about what they want. Can you do that?" They stared at me like I'd grown a second head. The doorbell rang a third time, and now there was knocking too. Firm, authoritative, the kind of knocking that said whoever was outside wasn't going away. "Can you do that?" I repeated, more urgently. Michael nodded slowly. Vanessa looked terrified, but managed a small nod as well. "Good," I said, moving toward the kitchen. "Don't call me. Don't text. I'll contact you when it's safe." "Mom, wait!" But I was already gone, slipping through the kitchen and out the back door into the October darkness. Robert's box clutched against my chest, my heart pounding with something that felt like fear but tasted like fury. My husband had been someone else. Someone important enough that people were still looking for him 43 years later. Someone who'd lied to me for our entire marriage. And now he was dead. And they were coming for me. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted. But I was going to find out, even if it killed me. I drove for 20 minutes before I allowed myself to think. The farmhouse was 40 miles from Michael's neighborhood, back roads all the way, and I kept checking my rearview mirror for headlights that followed too closely or stayed too constant. Nothing. Just darkness and the occasional deer's eyes reflecting in my high beams. My hands had stopped shaking by the time I pulled into the gravel driveway. The house rose up against the October sky, dark except for the porch light I'd left on. A habit from the years when Robert would work late and I'd wait up, wanting him to come home to warmth and light. Robert, James, whoever he'd been. I sat in the car for a full minute, engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the distant sound of coyotes on the ridge. Then I grabbed the wooden box and my purse and went inside, locking the door behind me and throwing the deadbolt for the first time in memory. The house felt different now. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every creak of settling wood made me flinch. I'd lived here for 41 years, but suddenly it felt like enemy territory, a place where secrets had festered in the walls. I made coffee, strong, black, and spread the contents of Robert's box across the kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. No more romantic candlelight and classical music. This required clinical clarity. The newspaper clipping was dated August 15, 1982. I read it 3 times, absorbing every detail. James Whitmore III, 26, heir to the Whitmore textile fortune, has been missing for 3 weeks. Boston police confirmed they are investigating possible foul play after bloodstains were found in his Beacon Hill apartment. Whitmore was last seen leaving the Harbor Club on July 23rd. His father, James Whitmore Jr., has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his whereabouts. $100,000. In 1982, that was real money. The kind of money that would motivate people to search for a very long time. I pulled out more photographs. Robert, James, at charity galas, yacht clubs, polo matches, always in expensive clothes, always with beautiful people, always looking like he belonged to a world that was light years away from Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Then I found the wedding announcement. The engagement of Miss Caroline Ashford Pemberton to Mr. James Whitmore III is announced by her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Reginald Pemberton of Greenwich, Connecticut. A June wedding is planned. The photo showed a young woman with perfect bone structure and a smile full of white teeth and old money. Caroline Ashford Pemberton, not the woman in the pearls from the earlier photo. Someone else. Someone Robert, James, had been engaged to marry. Someone who might still be alive. Someone who might be looking for answers. I was so absorbed in the photographs that I didn't hear the car until gravel crunched in the driveway. My blood turned to ice. I switched off the kitchen light and moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. A dark SUV sat in the driveway, engine running, headlights off. No one got out. They just sat there, a shadow presence, watching the house. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Mom, where are you?" Those men said they were from the estate lawyer's office. They had questions about Dad's will. "Are you okay?" The estate lawyer's office. At 9 o'clock on a Friday night. I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered the contents of the box, shoving everything back inside, my hands working fast despite the adrenaline making them clumsy. I needed a place to hide it. Not the basement, too obvious. Not my bedroom, too personal, the first place they'd look. The attic. The crawl space behind the chimney where Robert had stored old tax records and files from the farm's early years. I was halfway up the attic stairs when I heard it. The soft click of someone testing the back door. They weren't just watching anymore. I moved faster, climbing into the attic and pulling the stairs up behind me, wincing at every creak of wood. The attic was cramped and dusty, filled with 40 years of accumulated life. Christmas decorations, old furniture, boxes of clothes Emma had outgrown. I crawled on my hands and knees to the chimney, pulled away the sheet of plywood Robert had used to cover the crawl space, and shoved the wooden box deep inside. Below me, I heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. They were inside. I stayed frozen in the attic, barely breathing, listening to footsteps moving through my house. 2 sets, maybe 3. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. Drawers opened and closed. Furniture scraped across floors. They were searching, and they weren't being gentle about it. "Nothing down here." A man's voice. Educated, Boston accent. "Check upstairs." Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, confident. I pressed myself against the rafters, praying the attic stairs weren't visible, praying they wouldn't think to look up. "Bedroom's clear," another voice called. "No sign of anyone. Car's here, so she can't be far. Check the outbuildings." The footsteps retreated. I heard the back door open and close. Through a gap in the attic boards, I could see flashlight beams sweeping across the yard, heading toward the barn and the equipment shed. I had maybe 5 minutes. I scrambled down from the attic, moving as silently as I could, and grabbed my purse from where I'd left it on the hall table. My car keys were inside, along with my phone and wallet. The house was a disaster. Drawers pulled out, cushions overturned, papers scattered everywhere. They'd been thorough, but they hadn't found what they were looking for, because they didn't know me. Didn't know that a woman who'd spent 40 years managing a farm learned to think ahead, to plan for disasters, to keep important things safe from fire and flood and curious grandchildren. I slipped out the front door and around the side of the house, staying in the shadows. The SUV was still in the driveway, engine running. Through the barn door, I could see flashlights bobbing, hear voices calling to each other. My car was blocked in by the SUV. I'd have to walk. The nearest neighbor was the Morrison farm, 2 miles through the woods. Ben Morrison had been Robert's closest friend, the one who'd found us land to lease when we were just starting out, the one who'd helped with harvest every year until arthritis made it impossible. He was 80 now, a widower like me, living alone with his memories and his guns. His guns. I started running, staying off the road, following the old deer path that cut through the woods. My sensible shoes, chosen for a nice dinner with my son, were not made for cross-country hiking. Within 100 yards, I'd twisted my ankle. I kept going, ignoring the pain, branches whipping at my face in the darkness. Behind me, I heard shouting. They'd discovered I wasn't in the outbuildings. They'd figured out I'd run. Fan out. She can't have gotten far. I ran harder, my breath coming in gasps, my ankle screaming protest. The woods were pitch black except for the occasional glimpse of moon through the canopy. I'd walked this path hundreds of times in daylight, but now every tree looked the same. Every shadow threatened to send me sprawling. A flashlight beam swept across the trees to my right, too close. I dropped to the ground behind a fallen log, pressing myself flat against the damp earth, trying not to breathe too loudly. The beam passed over me, paused, came back. I could hear footsteps approaching, branches snapping under heavy boots. "I've got movement, Sector 3, a voice called into a radio. "Pursuing." The footsteps came closer. I could see the outline of a man now, tall and broad-shouldered, holding a flashlight in one hand and something else in the other. Something that could have been a phone or could have been a gun. I grabbed a handful of dirt and rocks and threw it as hard as I could to my left, away from the path to Morrison's farm. The man spun toward the sound, his flashlight following, and I bolted in the opposite direction. "There!" he shouted. "She's running." But I had a head start now, and I knew these woods. I veered off the deer path onto a narrower track that wound between dense underbrush. Branches tore at my clothes and skin, but I didn't slow down. The Morrison place was close now. I could see the faint glow of his security light through the trees. I burst out of the woods into Ben Morrison's backyard just as lights came on in the house. The back door opened and Ben appeared, shotgun in hand, wearing pajamas and a ratty bathrobe. "Brittany!" His voice was sharp with alarm. "What in the hell?" "Ben, please," I gasped, limping toward him. "I need help. There are men chasing me. They broke into my house." He didn't hesitate. Ben Morrison had served in Vietnam, had seen things he never talked about, and he recognized danger when he saw it. "Inside. Now." I stumbled through the door and he locked it behind us, flipping off the lights. We stood in the darkness of his kitchen, both breathing hard, while he peered out the window. "How many?" he asked quietly. "3, maybe 4. They came in a dark SUV. Ben, they're not just burglars. They're looking for something specific." "Something to do with Robert?" I looked at him sharply. "What do you know?" In the dim light from his security lamp outside, I saw his expression harden. "Robert and I talked toward the end. He was worried. Said if anything happened to him, you might need protecting." "He told you?" The betrayal cut deeper. "You knew he was lying about who he was?" "I knew he had a past he didn't want found," Ben said carefully. "I didn't ask questions. Man's entitled to his secrets. But he made me promise that if trouble ever came looking, I'd make sure you were safe." A flashlight beam swept across the yard. "They're coming," I whispered. Ben moved to the window, shotgun ready. "My truck's in the garage, keys in the ignition. You go out the front, take it, head to town, police station. Ben, I can't leave you here. I'm an old man with a gun on my own property and they're trespassing. You think I can't handle a few city boys?" He smiled grimly. "Besides, someone needs to get Sheriff Patterson out here. Go on now." "And Brittany?" He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never noticed before. The soldier he'd once been. The man who'd survived hell and come home changed. "Robert loved you. Whatever else he lied about, that was true. He told me so himself, right before he died. Said you were the only real thing in his whole damn life." My eyes burned with tears I didn't have time to shed. "Thank you. Front door's unlocked. Garage is attached. 3 minutes head start. Then I'm calling the law and making some noise of my own." I squeezed his arm and ran, through the dark house to the front door, into the garage where his ancient Ford pickup sat waiting. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the driveway, headlights off, using only the moonlight to navigate the road. In the rearview mirror, I saw flashlight beams converging on Ben's house. Then I heard the shotgun blast. A warning shot, I hoped, not something worse. I flipped on the headlights and drove faster, taking the back roads toward town, toward the police station, toward safety. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Against every instinct, I answered. "Mrs. Caldwell." A woman's voice, cultured and cold. Or should I say, Mrs. Whitmore? My heart stopped. We need to talk, the voice continued. About your late husband. About the money he stole. And about the very serious trouble you're in unless you cooperate. Who is this? Someone who's been looking for James Whitmore for 43 years. Someone who deserves answers. Someone who has no patience left. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my shaking hand, then at the dark road ahead, and realized with sickening certainty that this was only the beginning. They knew who I was. They knew about Robert. And they knew I had something they wanted. The only question was, what was I willing to do to survive? I didn't go to the police station. Something about that phone call, the woman's voice, the certainty in her tone, the way she'd said cooperate, told me that involving local law enforcement would be a mistake. These people had resources. They'd been searching for 43 years. They wouldn't be stopped by a small-town sheriff who'd probably never investigated anything more serious than cattle theft. Instead, I drove to the one place I thought they might not look, the Millbrook Public Library. It was closed, of course, well past 10 o'clock on a Friday night, but I knew the security code. I'd been on the library board for 15 years, had helped raise funds for the renovation, had spent countless volunteer hours shelving books and organizing reading programs for children. Martha Hendricks, the head librarian, had given me the code for emergencies. This qualified. I parked Ben's truck behind the building, out of sight from the street, and let myself in through the back door. The library was dark except for the emergency exit signs, their green glow casting eerie shadows across rows of silent books. I'd always loved libraries, their smell of paper and possibility, their promise of answers to any question, but tonight it felt like a mausoleum. I made my way to the computer section, staying away from windows, and logged into one of the public terminals. My hands trembled as I typed, James Whitmore III, Boston missing 1982. The results flooded the screen. Dozens of articles from the Boston Globe, the Herald, even the New York Times. The Whitmore family had been Boston royalty, old money, textile empire, political connections stretching back to the Revolutionary War. James Whitmore III had been the golden child, Harvard-educated, groomed to take over the family business. Until he disappeared. I clicked through article after article, piecing together the story. James had been engaged to Caroline Ashford Pemberton, daughter of another prominent Boston family. The wedding was scheduled for June 1983, but in July 1982, James had vanished after leaving the Harbor Club, an exclusive establishment where the city's elite gathered. His apartment had been found in disarray, blood on the carpet, signs of a struggle. Police suspected foul play, but had no body, no witnesses, no leads. The family had searched for years. Private investigators, reward money, even psychics. Nothing. Eventually, they'd held a memorial service and declared him legally dead. But someone, clearly, had never stopped looking. I searched for Caroline Ashford Pemberton and found a more recent article from 5 years ago. Boston philanthropist Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft donates $5 million to Children's Hospital. She'd hyphenated her name after marrying someone else, a diplomat named Richard Ashcroft. The photo accompanying the article showed an elegant woman in her 60s, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing pearls and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked like someone who didn't forgive easily. I was so focused on the screen that I almost didn't hear the library's front door open. Almost. I killed the monitor and dropped to the floor behind the circulation desk, my heart hammering so hard I was sure it could be heard across the room. Footsteps echoed on the tile floor, measured, confident, the sound of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Mrs. Caldwell? A man's voice, different from the ones at my house, younger with a hint of Brooklyn in the vowels. I know you're here. The truck outside gave you away. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. I stayed silent, pressed against the cool floor, barely breathing. My name is Daniel Torres. I'm a private investigator. I was hired by the Whitmore family to find James, to find out what happened to him. A pause. I know you must be scared. I know this must be overwhelming, but I'm not your enemy. More footsteps. coming closer to the circulation desk. "I've been working this case for 3 years," he continued, his voice softening. "The family hired me after the original investigator died. 73 years old, never gave up hope. That's the kind of hold James Whitmore had on people. Even after he vanished, they couldn't let him go. He was almost at the desk now. I could see the shadow of his legs through the gap at the bottom. Here's what I think happened," Torres said. "I think James stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to know. Something about his family's business, something criminal or at least morally questionable. I think he threatened to expose it, and I think someone tried to kill him for it." I held my breath. But James was smart, resourceful. He survived and he ran, changed his name, changed his life, stayed hidden for 43 years. That takes discipline, planning, and it takes love. The kind of love that makes a man willing to give up everything he was for a chance at something real. Despite myself, despite the fear, I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. "The question is," Torres said quietly, "what did he take with him when he ran? What evidence did he have? Because someone is very, very interested in making sure it stays buried. And those people, the ones who broke into your house tonight, they're not like me. They don't just want information. They want elimination." He crouched down, and suddenly we were face to face through the gap in the desk. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with dark eyes that held something like sympathy. "Please," he said, "let me help you. Before they find you again." I made a decision. Maybe it was the wrong one. I'd know soon enough. But sitting in the dark, hunted and alone, I decided to trust the man with kind eyes. I stood up slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Torres stood too, and I saw he was holding only a phone, not a weapon. "Thank you," he said. "That took courage. How did you know I'd come here?" "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Mrs. Caldwell. Learning your patterns, your habits. You come to the library every Tuesday afternoon. You volunteer with the literacy program. When you're stressed, you read. It seemed like a logical place. 3 weeks?" The implications sank in. "You've been watching me since before those people showed up? I had to make sure you weren't part of whatever James was running from. That you were innocent." He pocketed his phone. "You are, by the way, innocent. You had no idea who he really was." "No," I said bitterly. "I had no idea my entire marriage was a lie." "It wasn't a lie." Torres's voice was firm. "I've read every report, every interview, every scrap of information about James Whitmore III. The man was a lot of things. Privileged, arrogant, reckless. But he wasn't a good actor. He couldn't have faked 41 years of devotion. He loved you, Mrs. Caldwell. That much I'm certain of. Then why did he lie to me? To protect you. Because whatever he knew, whatever he had, was dangerous enough to kill for. Still is, apparently. I sank into one of the library chairs, suddenly exhausted. There's a box, papers, photographs, documents. He left it for me with our son. Instructions to open it 2 years after his death. Torres's eyes sharpened. Where is it now? Hidden. Safe. I need to see it. Why should I trust you? I looked at him directly. You said yourself there are people who want to eliminate the evidence. How do I know you're not working for them? You don't, he admitted. But consider this. If I wanted to hurt you, I could have done it 3 weeks ago. If I wanted the evidence destroyed, I could have burned your house down while you slept. I'm here because I want the truth. And because... He hesitated. Because my uncle was Carlos Torres. He was the original investigator hired by the Whitmore family. He spent 30 years of his life searching for James, and it ate him alive. He died believing he'd failed, that James was dead in a shallow grave somewhere. I took over the case to finish what he started, to give him peace, even in death. There was something in his voice, grief, determination, a need for closure that I recognized because I felt it too. The woman who called me, I said. She said Robert, James, stole money. Is that true? Torres's expression darkened. That's what his father claimed. $20 million disappeared from family accounts right before James vanished. But here's the thing. I've been through the financial records. The money wasn't stolen. It was moved. Carefully, methodically, over the course of 6 months before his disappearance. James wasn't running from theft. He was documenting something. What? Money laundering. The Whitmore family business wasn't just textiles. It was a front for washing money for some very dangerous people. James found out, and he gathered proof. That $20 million? It was dirty money that he moved into accounts where it could be traced. He was building a case. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. And then they came for him. Yes. But he escaped. And he took the evidence with him. I thought of the wooden box hidden in my attic crawl space, of the documents I hadn't yet examined, of Robert's final warning. Trust no one. If what you're saying is true, I said slowly, then that evidence is worth killing for. Still, after 43 years, some of the people involved are still alive, still powerful, still have everything to lose. Torres leaned forward. Mrs. Caldwell, Brittany, I can protect you, but only if you let me. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Mom, please call me. Vanessa is in the hospital. They hurt her. The world tilted. What? Torres saw my expression. What's wrong? I showed him the text with shaking hands. He cursed under his breath. They're escalating. Using your family to pressure you. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. I'm calling in backup. People I trust. We need to get your son and granddaughter somewhere safe. Emma, I whispered. She's at a sleepover. Madison's house. Do you have the address? I nodded, my mind racing. Michael had said Vanessa was hurt. How badly? And why would they target her instead of him? Unless they had targeted Michael too. Unless the text wasn't from him at all. Wait, I grabbed Torres's arm. Call the number. Don't text back. Call it. If it's really Michael, he'll answer. If it's not, Torres's eyes widened with understanding. He hit the call button and put the phone on speaker. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice answered. The same cultured, cold voice from the earlier call. Mrs. Caldwell. So nice of you to reach out. Your son is fine, by the way. For now. As is your daughter-in-law. But my patience is wearing thin. What do you want? My voice came out steady, hard. I want what James stole from my family. I want the documents he used to betray us. And I want them within 12 hours. Or people you love start dying. A pause. Do we understand each other? Who are you? Someone you should have met a long time ago. Someone who was supposed to be family. The woman's voice dripped with venom. I'm Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft, James's fiancée. The woman he abandoned without explanation, without closure, without dignity. The woman who spent 43 years wondering why. My breath caught. You're behind this? The break-ins, the threats? I'm behind finding the truth, whatever it takes. Her voice hardened. 12 hours, Mrs. Caldwell. The documents for your family's safety. I'll be in touch with location details. The line went dead. Torres and I stared at each other in the dim library light. She's not working for the people who laundered the money, I said slowly, realization dawning. She's working against them. She wants revenge. Or justice, Torres countered. Depends on your perspective. Either way, she has my family, and she wants evidence that could destroy powerful people. I stood up, decision made. We need to get that box, now, before anyone else gets hurt. It's at your farm? Yes. That's the first place they'll look. They might already be there. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are. I met his eyes. You said you wanted the truth. Well, here's your chance. But understand this. Once we open that box, once we see what Robert, James, spent 43 years protecting, there's no going back. People will die. Maybe us included. Torres smiled grimly. Lady, I've been chasing ghosts for 3 years. I'm ready for some real answers. Then let's go get them. We left through the back door into the October night, and I realized with cold certainty that the woman I'd been, the gentle widow, the patient grandmother, the woman who made pies and volunteered at libraries, was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, someone who'd been married to a man who'd outmaneuvered some of the most dangerous people in the world for 4 decades. Someone who'd learned from him, even without knowing it. The hunters had become the hunted, and I was done running. We approached the farm from the east, through the Hendersons' property, cutting across fields I'd known since my children were young. Torres drove with the headlights off, navigating by moonlight, while I sat in the passenger seat of Ben's truck, planning our approach like a general planning a siege. It was nearly midnight. The 12-hour deadline Caroline had given me meant I had until noon tomorrow. But time wasn't the only pressure bearing down on us. 2 vehicles in your driveway, Torres said, peering through binoculars. Black SUV and a sedan. At least 4 people, maybe more. They're not even trying to hide. Why would they? I said bitterly. They've got what they want. Leverage. They know I'll come back. Will you? I looked at him. I'm here, aren't I? We parked half a mile away, hidden behind the Hendersons' equipment barn, and approached on foot through the woods. My ankle throbbed where I'd twisted it earlier, but I ignored it. Pain was just information, and right now it was telling me I was alive. The farmhouse blazed with light, every window illuminated, as if they wanted to make sure I knew they'd taken possession. Through the kitchen window, I could see figures moving, searching, tearing my life apart room by room. The attic, I whispered to Torres. The box is hidden behind the chimney in the crawl space, but we can't get there from inside, not with them here. Is there another way? I thought about the farmhouse's construction, the renovations Robert and I had made over the years, the secrets of its bones that only we knew. The roof. There's an access panel on the north side that leads directly into the attic. Robert installed it 15 years ago when we had squirrels nesting up there. He wanted to be able to check for damage without going through the house. Can you climb? I'm 63, not dead. Torres smiled despite the tension. Fair enough. Let's go. We circled wide, staying in the tree line, until we reached the north side of the house where shadows were deepest. The access panel was 12 feet up, reachable only by the old metal ladder Robert had bolted to the wall behind a trellis of climbing roses. The roses had grown wild since his death, thorns thick as fingers, but they also provided cover. We crept forward, and I began to climb, ignoring the thorns that tore at my clothes and skin. Torres followed below me, one hand on my ankle to steady me when the old ladder creaked. At the top, I worked the access panel open. It was stiff from disuse, and for a terrible moment I thought it might be locked or rusted shut. Then it gave with a soft groan, and I pulled myself into the darkness of the attic. Torres came up behind me, pulling the panel closed. We lay still for a moment, listening. Below us, floorboards creaked, voices murmured. Someone laughed, a sound so casual and wrong it made my blood run cold. How long do you need? Torres breathed in my ear. 2 minutes. I crawled toward the chimney, my hands finding familiar shapes in the darkness. The boxes of Christmas ornaments, the old trunk full of Emma's baby clothes, the stack of Robert's farming journals that I'd never had the heart to throw away. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, except the plywood covering the crawl space. It was moved. Not much, maybe 6 inches, but enough that I knew someone had been here. Someone had found the box. My heart stopped. I reached into the crawl space anyway, my fingers scrabbling in the dust and insulation, desperate and disbelieving. Nothing. The box was gone. Torres, I whispered, my voice breaking. It's not here. He crawled over quickly, checked for himself, his face grim in the faint moonlight filtering through the attic vents. They found it. When? It wasn't them. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They're still searching. If they had the box, they'd be gone. Then who? A board creaked directly below us. We froze. Check the attic again, a man's voice said. She knows this place inside and out. If I were hiding something valuable, I'd put it somewhere I could access without anyone knowing. Footsteps on the attic stairs. Torres and I looked at each other, and I saw my own fear reflected in his eyes. We were trapped. The access panel was our only exit, but climbing down would take time. Time we didn't have. And even if we made it down, they'd hear us, chase us, catch us. The attic stairs folded down with a metallic groan. I grabbed Torres's arm and pulled him toward the far corner where the roof sloped lowest, where decades of accumulated junk created a maze of obstacles. We pressed ourselves flat behind a stack of old furniture, barely breathing, as flashlight beams swept across the attic. Nothing up here but dust and garbage, the man said, his light passing inches from where we hid. She's not stupid enough to hide anything obvious. Keep looking anyway. The boss wants this place torn apart. Two of them now, moving through the attic, their lights methodical and thorough. It was only a matter of time before they found us. And then my phone rang. Not just vibrated. Rang. The cheerful tone I'd set for Michael's number, impossibly loud in the silence of the attic. Everything happened at once. The flashlight swung toward us. Torres lunged forward, tackling the nearest man, sending them both crashing into boxes. I scrambled for the access panel, my phone still ringing, giving away our position like a beacon. The second man grabbed my ankle, yanked hard, and I went down, my head cracking against a wooden beam. Stars exploded across my vision. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Torres grunt in pain, heard the meaty sound of fists on flesh, heard someone shouting downstairs. I kicked backward, my heel connecting with something soft. The man cursed and his grip loosened. I crawled forward, reached the access panel, shoved it open, and started climbing down without looking back. "Brittany, go!" Torres shouted from somewhere above me. I dropped the last 6 feet, landing hard in the rose bushes, thorns shredding my arms and face. Behind me, I heard the man following, heard more voices converging, heard the organized chaos of a hunt. I ran. Through the yard, past the barn, into the fields where corn stubble remained from the autumn harvest. My lungs burned. My vision swam from the blow to my head. But I kept running because stopping meant capture, and capture meant they'd know I didn't have what they wanted. Capture meant I was useless to them. Capture meant I was dead. I'd made it maybe 200 yards when headlights blazed to life ahead of me, cutting across the field, trapping me in their glare. A car, I couldn't tell what kind, sat idling, door open. Someone standing beside it. Mrs. Caldwell. A woman's voice, familiar, but not the voice from the phone. "Please stop running. I'm not here to hurt you." I slowed, my body screaming for oxygen, my mind trying to process this new threat. The woman stepped into the light, and I saw her clearly for the first time. She was in her 30s, professionally dressed despite the late hour, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she was holding something in her hands. Robert's wooden box. "My name is Jennifer Matsumoto," she said calmly, as if we were meeting at a cocktail party instead of a midnight field. "I'm an attorney with the firm of Blackstone and Associates. I've been the executor of your husband's estate for the past 2 years, and I think we need to talk." Behind me I heard shouts, the sound of people spreading out to search. They'd lost me in the darkness, but they'd find me soon. "Get in the car," Jennifer said. "Now, before they see you." I hesitated for one crucial second, trying to decide if this was another trap, another layer of deception. But the box was real, and she'd had it for 2 years, which meant Robert had trusted her with it, had planned for this moment. I got in the car. Jennifer slid behind the wheel and drove without turning on the headlights, navigating the field by memory or instinct or sheer nerve. Within seconds, we were on the back road that led away from the farm, and she finally switched on the lights. "Torres," I gasped. "There's a man. Daniel Torres. He's still back there. They'll kill him." "Mr. Torres can take care of himself," Jennifer said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "He's former military, former FBI. Your husband chose him specifically." "What? Robert didn't choose him. Torres said he was hired by the Whitmore family." "Torres lied." Jennifer's voice was matter-of-fact. "He was hired by your husband 3 years ago, before Robert died. Hired to investigate the people who'd been looking for him, to determine the level of threat, and to protect you when the time came. Everything he told you tonight was designed to build trust while keeping you safe." My head spun. "But he told me about his uncle, about the investigation. All true. But his uncle wasn't hired by the Whitmore family. He was hired by your husband 30 years ago to keep watch, to warn him if anyone got close. When his uncle died, Torres took over. He's been protecting you since before you knew you needed protection." I stared at her, trying to reconcile this information with everything I thought I knew. "Who are you really?" "Exactly who I said. An attorney. But I'm also the person your husband trusted with the most important thing in his life. The truth. She glanced at me, her expression softening. He loved you very much, Mrs. Caldwell. Everything he did, every lie he told, every precaution he took, it was all to keep you safe. Safe from whom? From everyone. The people who wanted him dead. The people who wanted the evidence he'd gathered. Even from his own family. She paused. Especially from his own family. Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft. Among others. But Caroline is the most dangerous. Because she's not motivated by money or self-preservation. She's motivated by rage. By betrayal. By 43 years of unanswered questions. Jennifer turned onto the highway, heading north. She's not going to stop until she has what she wants. Which is the complete destruction of the Whitmore family legacy. And she's willing to burn everything and everyone in her path to achieve it. My phone buzzed. Another text from Michael's number. Mom, I know you're reading this. They say if you don't give them the documents by dawn, they'll kill Emma. Please, I'm begging you. Give them what they want. Dawn. They'd moved up the timeline. They have my granddaughter, I said, my voice hollow. No. Jennifer's reply was firm. They have your son. They have your daughter-in-law. But your granddaughter is safe. I have people watching her. Have had them watching her since this began. She's at her friend's house, completely unaware anything is wrong, with 2 trained operatives disguised as the friend's parents standing guard. How? Your husband planned for everything, Mrs. Caldwell. Every contingency, every threat, every possible scenario. He spent 40 years preparing for this day, and he left very specific instructions. She glanced at the box on the back seat, including when and how you should learn the complete truth. Then tell me everything. Not yet. First, we need to get somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find us. Then we open the box together, and I show you what your husband spent his entire life protecting. My family. We'll be released once we have leverage. Right now, Caroline thinks she has all the power, but she doesn't know what's really in that box. Doesn't know what your husband discovered in those final months before his disappearance. Jennifer's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. Doesn't know that the evidence he gathered doesn't just implicate the people who laundered money through Whitmore Textiles. Who else? Caroline's family, the Pembertons. They weren't just connected to the money laundering. They orchestrated it. They were the ones who tried to kill your husband when he found out. They were the ones who've been searching for him all these years. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Caroline doesn't know. She thinks her family were victims, that James betrayed them. But they're the ones… Yes. And when she finds out the truth, when she sees the proof, it will destroy her. Destroy everything she's built her life around. The question is, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to use that weapon? I thought about Emma, about Michael, about Vanessa in the hospital. I thought about Robert lying in the ground, his secrets buried with him for 2 years while I mourned a man I'd never really known. And I thought about the woman I'd been just 24 hours ago, the gentle widow who baked pies and read to children at the library. She was gone. Yes, I said. I'm willing. Jennifer nodded, satisfied. Good. Because this is only going to get worse before it gets better. And you're going to need to be stronger than you've ever been in your life. Where are we going? Somewhere your husband prepared. A safe house stocked and ready. He bought it 15 years ago. Put it in a false name. Never told anyone about it. She smiled grimly. Not even you. More secrets. The secrets that kept you alive. We drove in silence for another 20 minutes, leaving Millbrook behind, heading into territory I didn't recognize. Finally, Jennifer turned onto a narrow dirt road that wound through dense forest, ending at a small cabin set back from the road, invisible unless you knew where to look. She parked behind the cabin and killed the engine. We'll be safe here, for a little while at least. Inside, the cabin was sparse but functional. A single room with a bed, a table, a small kitchen. Jennifer set the wooden box on the table and pulled out her phone. First things first. We need to establish that you're alive and unharmed. That you're willing to negotiate. I'm going to record a video of you, and we're going to send it to Caroline. What do I say? The truth. That you have the documents. that you're willing to trade for your family's safety, but that you want proof of life first. Video of Michael, Vanessa, and confirmation that Emma is untouched. Jennifer positioned her phone on a stack of books, creating a makeshift tripod. And Brittany? You need to look strong, not scared, not desperate, strong. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and stared into the camera. The woman looking back at me from the phone's screen was almost unrecognizable. Hair wild, face scratched and bloody from the rose thorns, eyes hard as flint. "Record," I said. Jennifer pressed the button. "Mrs. Pemberton Ashcroft," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I have what you want. All of it. Every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence my husband gathered. I'm willing to negotiate an exchange. But first, you're going to prove to me that my family is alive and unharmed. You have 2 hours. After that, I start sending copies of these documents to the FBI, the SEC, and the Boston Globe. Your move." Jennifer stopped recording and immediately sent the video. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we open the box," she said. "And I show you exactly what you're bargaining with." She produced the brass key, the same one Michael had used what felt like a lifetime ago, and unlocked the box. But when she lifted the lid, the contents looked different than I remembered. More organized, more complete. "The box Michael gave you was only the trigger. The full dossier has always been with me, under Robert's instructions," Jennifer said calmly. "What your son showed you was the first layer," Jennifer explained. "The photographs, the newspaper clippings, the letter, those were meant to introduce you to the idea that your husband had a past. But this," she pulled out a leather-bound ledger, pages filled with dates, names, and numbers in Robert's careful handwriting. "This is what they're really after." I opened the ledger and began to read. And with each page, with each revelation, I understood why my husband had run, why he'd hidden, why he'd lied to me for 41 years, and why he'd been willing to die to keep these secrets safe. The ledger was a masterpiece of documentation. 43 years of evidence, meticulously maintained, updated even after Robert's supposed death, page after page of transactions, dates, names, a complete map of how the Pemberton family had used Whitmore Textiles as a front for laundering money from drug cartels, arms dealers, and corrupt politicians. But that wasn't the worst of it. "Page 73, Jennifer said quietly. "That's the one that matters most." I flipped through the ledger with shaking hands until I found it. A single transaction, dated July 15, 1982. $20 million transferred from Whitmore accounts to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. And beside it, in Robert's handwriting, payment received. CAP, Caroline Ashford Pemberton. She wasn't a victim, I whispered. She was part of it. She was the architect, Jennifer corrected. Your husband discovered that Caroline had been the one running the money laundering operation for years, using her father's connections and the Whitmore family name as cover. When James found out and confronted her, she ordered his death, made it look like a kidnapping gone wrong, but she underestimated him. He took the evidence and ran. Not just the evidence, the money too. That $20 million? He moved it into accounts she couldn't access, accounts that would automatically transfer to law enforcement if anything happened to him. It was insurance. A dead man's switch. Jennifer pulled out another document, a legal contract, yellowed with age. He was going to testify against her, had a meeting scheduled with federal prosecutors for August 1st, 1982. But Caroline found out, sent people to his apartment the night before. He barely escaped. I stared at the document, at Robert's signature at the bottom, James Whitmore III, and tried to reconcile it with the man who'd taught me to plant tomatoes, who'd held my hand during Michael's birth, who'd slow danced with me in the kitchen on our anniversary. Why didn't he go to the authorities later, once he was safe? Because the authorities were compromised. Caroline's father was a federal judge. Her uncle was a senator. She had connections everywhere. Police, FBI, prosecutors. Your husband knew that going public would just get him killed and accomplish nothing. Jennifer's expression was grim. So he stayed hidden, kept the evidence safe, and waited. Waited for what? for the statute of limitations to expire on some charges, for key players to die, for the political landscape to shift enough that the evidence would matter again. She gestured to the ledger. And for technology to advance enough that he could prove what he'd documented. Half of this evidence was useless in 1982, just his word against theirs. But now, with digital forensics, with databases, with new ways to trace money, this ledger is a nuclear bomb. My phone buzzed. A response from Caroline, faster than I'd expected. A video file. I pressed play with trembling fingers. The video showed Michael and Vanessa in what looked like a warehouse, tied to chairs, both looking exhausted but unharmed. Michael's face was bruised. Vanessa's lip was split, but they were alive. "Mom," Michael said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Dad made me promise, but I should have." Someone off camera must have gestured for him to stop. "They say if you give them what they want, they'll let us go. Please, just do what they ask." The video cut to a different scene. Emma at her friend's house, visible through a window, laughing as she painted her friend's nails. Innocent. Unaware. "See?" Caroline's voice came from off camera, cold and satisfied. "Everyone you love, in my reach. The warehouse location will be sent to you within the hour. Come alone. Bring the documents. No tricks, or I start sending you pieces of your family." The video ended. I looked at Jennifer. She's insane. She's desperate. There's a difference. Jennifer was already typing on her laptop, pulling up maps and satellite imagery. She's maintained her family's reputation for 43 years, married into diplomacy, built a life as a respected philanthropist. If this evidence goes public, she loses everything. Money, status, freedom. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison. Good? Jennifer looked up sharply. "You want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference." For the first time since we'd met, Jennifer smiled. A real smile, not the professional mask she'd been wearing. "Your husband said you'd say something like that. He said underneath all that kindness and patience you had steel in your spine. He was proud of that." Tears burned in my eyes, but I blinked them away. There would be time for grief later. Right now, I needed to be the woman Robert had believed I could be. "What's the plan?" I asked. "We go to the meeting. We bring the documents. Or rather, we bring copies. The originals stay here, with instructions to my firm to release them if I don't check in every 12 hours. Jennifer pulled out a folder containing what looked like photocopies of the ledger. "We wire you with a recording device. We get Caroline to confess everything on tape, and then Torres and his team move in. You knew? I'm 63, not stupid. Torres disappeared at the farm, but you're not worried about him. Which means he's exactly where you want him to be, assembling a team, preparing to extract Michael and Vanessa." I leaned forward. "What I don't know is why you need Caroline's confession. You have all the evidence right here." Jennifer's expression turned carefully neutral. "The evidence in this ledger implicates a lot of people. Powerful people. People who could tie this up in courts for decades, who could use their connections to suppress or discredit it. But a confession? From Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft, respected philanthropist and diplomat's widow? That's the kind of thing that makes headlines, that forces action, that can't be buried. So I'm bait. You're the key. You're the only person who can make her angry enough to forget her caution, to say things she shouldn't say, to reveal herself." Jennifer closed her laptop. "I won't lie to you, Brittany. This is dangerous. Caroline is unstable, and desperate people do unpredictable things. If you want to back out, if you want to just turn this over to the FBI and hope for the best, I'll understand." I thought about Robert, facing down killers in a Boston apartment, making the split-second decision to run rather than fight. I thought about 43 years of looking over his shoulder, of maintaining a false identity, of living every day with the knowledge that discovery meant death. And I thought about the life he'd given me despite all of it. The real love, the honest connection, the partnership that had sustained us through decades. "I'm not backing out," I said. "When do we leave?" "Dawn. They'll send the location in about an hour, which gives us time to prepare." Jennifer stood and moved to a closet I hadn't noticed, pulling out equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. Tiny cameras, wireless microphones, tracking devices. Your husband left all of this here. He anticipated we might need it. He really did think of everything. Almost everything. Jennifer's expression darkened. He didn't anticipate dying before he could finish this himself. The heart attack was random, unlucky. He'd planned to reveal everything on your 50th wedding anniversary. 9 more years. By then, most of the key players would be dead or too old to mount an effective defense. The timing would have been perfect, but Caroline got impatient. Caroline got a tip. Someone, we still don't know who, told her that James Whitmore might have survived, might be living under an assumed name in Pennsylvania. She hired investigators, and eventually they found Robert Caldwell, former businessman with no history before 1982, no family records, no paper trail. It took them 3 years, but they found him. And killed him. We don't think so. The heart attack appears to have been genuine. But the stress of knowing they were close, of realizing his time was running out, that could have contributed. Jennifer began checking the equipment methodically. After he died, Caroline held back, waiting to see if any evidence would surface. When it didn't, she assumed you didn't know anything. But then the 2-year mark approached, and she started to worry. What if Robert had left instructions? What if you were about to discover the truth? So she moved first. Yes. And in doing so, she made her first real mistake in 43 years. She exposed herself. My phone buzzed again. The location: an abandoned textile mill outside of Harrisburg, 40 miles away. The time: 6 a.m., less than 3 hours from now. That's one of the old Whitmore facilities, Jennifer said, checking her own phone. Shut down in the 90s, left to rot. Appropriate, really. Everything coming full circle. She spent the next hour wiring me with recording equipment, showing me how to position myself for the best audio, coaching me on what to say to provoke Caroline into revealing herself. Remember, Jennifer said as she adjusted the tiny microphone hidden in my collar. She's spent 43 years believing she was the victim, that James betrayed her, stole from her family, destroyed her future. You need to shatter that illusion. Make her angry enough to tell the truth. And if she just shoots me instead, Torres will have the building surrounded. At the first sign of violence, his team moves in. Jennifer met my eyes. But I won't lie. There's a window of vulnerability. The seconds between when she decides to kill you and when Torres can reach you. If you're going to do this, you need to be smart. Stay alert. Don't give her a clear shot. I've survived 63 years on a farm, I said dryly. I think I can handle one bitter old woman. She's not old. She's our age. And she's killed before. That stopped me. What? The investigators who got too close to finding Robert over the years. 3 of them, in 3 different decades. Made to look like accidents. Car crashes, heart attacks, a mugging gone wrong. But Torres traced them all back to Caroline. Jennifer's expression was hard. She's not just bitter, Brittany. She's a serial killer who's evaded justice for half a century. Don't underestimate her. I swallowed hard, but nodded. Then we'd better make sure this works. We left the cabin at 5 a.m., darkness still heavy around us, and drove toward Harrisburg in silence. Jennifer's hands were steady on the wheel, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking the mirrors. How long have you known? I asked quietly. About Robert? About all of this? I met him 5 years ago. He came to our firm looking for someone who specialized in posthumous evidence release, documents that would only become public after someone's death. He was already sick then, already knew his heart was failing. He wanted to make sure that if he died before he could finish this, someone would be there to help you. He was planning his own death. He was planning for every contingency, including the one where Caroline found you before you found the truth. Jennifer glanced at me. He loved you very much, Brittany. I've handled a lot of estates, a lot of final wishes, but I've never seen someone go to such lengths to protect someone. He built a fortress around you, made of lies and misdirection and careful planning. And it worked. You were safe for 43 years. Until now. Until now. But now you're not the same woman you were a week ago. You're not even the same woman you were yesterday. You're the woman he always knew you could be. We arrived at the textile mill just as the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. that gray pre-dawn light that makes everything look ghostly and unreal. The building was massive, 5 stories of broken windows and crumbling brick, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had long since been breached in a dozen places. 3 vehicles were parked in the lot: the black SUV from my farm, a sedan, and a white van with tinted windows. "That's a lot of people," I said, my mouth dry. "Torres is here too. You just can't see him." Jennifer handed me a small panic button disguised as a key fob. "If things go wrong, press this. Don't hesitate. Don't try to be brave. Just press it." I took the key fob and the folder of documents and stepped out of the car. The morning air was cold, carrying the scent of rust and decay. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistled. I walked toward the mill entrance, my shoes crunching on broken glass and gravel. The door was open, hanging crooked on its hinges. Inside, the vast space was empty except for rusted machinery and debris. Shafts of early light filtered through the broken windows, creating patterns on the concrete floor. "Mrs. Caldwell," Caroline's voice echoed from somewhere above. "So nice of you to join us. Top floor. Take the stairs. The elevator hasn't worked in 20 years." I climbed, my footsteps echoing, my heart hammering against my ribs. 5 flights of stairs, each one taking me higher, deeper into the trap. On the top floor, I found them. Michael and Vanessa were tied to chairs in the center of the room, just like in the video. 4 men in dark suits stood around them, professional, armed, their faces expressionless. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the rising sun, was Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft. She was beautiful even now. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive clothes, jewelry that probably cost more than my house. But her eyes were dead, cold, like looking into a frozen lake. "You have something of mine," she said without preamble. "You have something of mine," I countered, gesturing to Michael and Vanessa. Caroline smiled, and it was the most frightening thing I'd ever seen. "Fair enough. The documents, please." I held up the folder. "First, I want to know why. Why did you do it? Why try to kill him?" "Because he was going to destroy everything. My family, my future, my name. He was going to be a hero, the whistleblower who brought down the corrupt Pembertons, while I went to prison. I couldn't allow that." "So you ordered his death?" "I ordered him taught a lesson. The death was supposed to come later, after he'd learned his place." Caroline's voice was matter-of-fact, discussing murder like a business transaction. "But he ran, like a coward, abandoned me, abandoned his family, stole millions of dollars, and vanished. Do you know what that did to me? The humiliation, the questions. Everyone assumed he'd run off with another woman, that I wasn't enough for him. You weren't," I said quietly, "because he saw who you really were." Caroline's expression darkened. "Don't pretend you knew him. You knew Robert Caldwell, a fiction, a mask he wore to hide from his responsibilities. I knew James Whitmore, the real man, the one who was supposed to be mine. The real man chose me. Over you, over his family, over everything." I took a step forward. "And he spent 43 years documenting every crime you committed, every life you destroyed, every dollar you laundered. You think you've been looking for him? He's been watching you, building a case against you, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you. He's dead," Caroline spat. "The moment has passed." "Has it?" I opened the folder, showing her the first page of the ledger, her signature clear as day, authorizing a transfer of drug money. "Because it seems to me like his moment is right now." Caroline stared at the page, and I watched her face change, from arrogance to confusion to dawning horror. "That's not— I never signed—" "You signed it. July 15th, 1982. 1 week before you tried to have James killed. He photographed everything, documented everything, kept it all safe. And now it's all going public. You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, a draft email, already composed, addressed to the FBI, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, with attachments clearly labeled. 1 button. That's all it takes. The only question is whether you want a chance to explain yourself first." "Explain myself?" Caroline laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "To you? You're nobody, a farmer's wife. A woman who spent her entire life living someone else's lie. You think you can judge me? I don't have to judge you. The evidence does that all by itself. I took another step forward. Closer now. Close enough to see the sweat beginning to bead on her perfect forehead. But I want to understand. Help me understand how you became this. How the woman James loved enough to propose to became a monster. And there it was, the crack in her armor. Her hand moved to her purse, and I knew with terrible certainty that she had a gun in there, that she was going to kill me, that I'd pushed too hard. I pressed the panic button. Everything happened in seconds. The windows exploded inward as Torres and his team came through on ropes, moving with military precision. Caroline's men reached for their weapons, but were taken down before they could fire. Michael and Vanessa dove sideways, still tied to their chairs, as bullets sparked off metal machinery, and Caroline pulled out her gun, aimed it directly at my chest, her face twisted with rage and hate. "You took everything from me," she screamed. "He chose you instead of me." I didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked her in the eyes and said, "No, you took everything from yourself. The moment you chose money over love, the moment you chose murder over justice. James didn't leave you, Caroline. You destroyed him. And now you've destroyed yourself." Her finger tightened on the trigger. A shot rang out. Caroline dropped to the ground, clutching her shoulder, the gun skittering away across the concrete. Torres appeared at my side, weapon raised, his face grim. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, my legs suddenly weak. "Michael, we've got them. They're safe." Torres kicked Caroline's gun away and pulled out zip ties for her wrists. "And we got everything on recording. Her confession, her threats, all of it." Jennifer appeared in the doorway, flanked by FBI agents. "Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, witness intimidation, and about 40 other charges we'll detail later." Caroline looked up at me from the floor, blood seeping through her expensive blouse, her perfect hair disheveled, her mask finally shattered. "You've won," she said bitterly. "Congratulations. You get to be the widow of a hero, while I become the villain of the story. How fair?" "Fair?" I knelt down beside her, and when I spoke, my voice was steel. "My husband spent 43 years in hiding because of you. He died never being able to use his real name, never being able to see his family, never being able to claim his own identity. You took that from him, from me, from our children. So no, Caroline, this isn't about fair, this is about justice. Finally." I stood and walked over to where Torres's team was cutting Michael and Vanessa free. Michael threw his arms around me, and I held him tight, breathing in the scent of him, grateful beyond words that he was alive. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Shh," I said, stroking his hair like I had when he was small. "It's over now. It's finally over." But even as I said it, even as the FBI led Caroline away in handcuffs, even as the nightmare seemed to be ending, I knew that one question remained, the most important question of all. Who had I really been married to for 43 years? And could I forgive him for the lifetime of lies? 3 months later, I stood in the farmhouse kitchen making coffee, watching the morning sun paint gold across the fields. Robert and I had worked together for 4 decades. The house was quiet. Michael and Vanessa had gone home 2 weeks ago, finally feeling safe enough to return to their own lives. Emma had stayed with me for a few days after everything ended, asking questions I tried to answer as honestly as I could. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that her grandfather had been someone else entirely? That love and lies can exist in the same heart? You tell her the truth, I'd decided. You tell her that people are complicated. That sometimes the best things in our lives come from the most unexpected places. That her grandfather had loved her truly, even if his name had been false. She'd hugged me tight and said, "Grandma, you're braver than Captain Marvel." I'd laughed through my tears and told her I was just stubborn. The criminal cases against Caroline and her surviving associates had made national headlines. "Boston philanthropist arrested in 40-year money laundering scheme," read the New York Times. "Diplomat's widow linked to multiple murders," declared the Washington Post. Every day brought new revelations as prosecutors worked through Robert's meticulously documented evidence. Caroline had tried to plead insanity, then attempted suicide in her cell, and finally settled into a bitter silence broken only by periodic rants about betrayal and injustice. Her trial was scheduled for next spring. Her lawyers had asked me to testify. I'd agreed. I owed Robert that much. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Jennifer Matsumoto's sensible sedan in the driveway. We'd become something like friends in the aftermath, bound together by secrets and survival, by the weight of what we knew and could never unknow. "I brought bagels," she announced when I opened the door, holding up a paper bag. "And I have news." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd first spread out the contents of Robert's box, a lifetime ago in October. Now it was January, snow covering the fields outside, the world clean and white and new. "The federal investigation has expanded," Jennifer said, pulling documents from her briefcase with the efficiency I'd come to expect. "Robert's evidence has led to 14 indictments so far, including 2 sitting congressmen and a former cabinet secretary. The Justice Department is calling it the largest financial crime prosecution in decades. Because of Robert. Because of James," Jennifer corrected gently. "We should probably start using his real name. He earned it back." I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, feeling its warmth. I've been thinking about that, about names and identity, and what's real versus what's performance. I met her eyes. The man who died in the North Pasture was Robert Caldwell. He'd been Robert for longer than he'd ever been James. That's who he chose to be. That's who he was with me. Jennifer nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Robert it is. What else?" "The Whitmore family wants to meet you. James's, Robert's, younger sister, Margaret. She's 70 now, lives in Maine. She never believed her brother was dead, spent years searching for him herself. When she learned the truth, she wept for 3 days straight." Jennifer pulled out a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. "She'd like to visit, if you're willing. No pressure, no expectations. She just wants to hear about his life, the life he chose." I took the letter, hands trembling slightly. A sister. Robert had a sister, and I'd never known. More family, more connections, more pieces of a puzzle I was still learning to see clearly. "I'll think about it," I said. "There's more." Jennifer's expression shifted, became almost pleased. "The money. The 20 million Robert moved into those offshore accounts. It's been sitting there for 43 years, accruing interest. With proper legal representation, which you now have, and given that Robert was the legal heir to a portion of the Whitmore estate, and that he was acting to prevent criminal activity, there's a strong case that the money belongs to you." I stared at her. $20 million? Closer to 60 million now, with interest and investment returns. "Robert was smart about where he put it," Jennifer smiled. "You're a very wealthy woman, Brittany." The number was so large it felt abstract, unreal. "I don't want it," I heard myself say. "It's blood money, drug money. It came from the same crimes that destroyed lives. Which is why you're going to do something good with it," Jennifer said firmly. "Robert left specific instructions. If the money was ever recovered, he wanted it used to establish a foundation, one that helps victims of financial crimes, that supports families of whistleblowers, that funds investigations into corruption." And she pulled out another document, this one bound and official-looking. "I've already started the paperwork. The Robert Caldwell Foundation for Financial Justice. If you agree, of course." I looked at the document, at Robert's vision made tangible, and felt something ease in my chest. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I agree." We spent the next hour going over the details, board members, mission statements, grant procedures. Jennifer had thought of everything, had already begun building the infrastructure Robert had envisioned. By the time she left, the foundation existed in more than just theory. It was real, concrete, a legacy that would outlive all of us. After she drove away, I walked out to the barn, breathing in the cold January air, my boots crunching on snow-covered ground. The barn smelled of hay and old wood and memories. This was where Robert had proposed, 41 years ago, getting down on one knee in his work clothes and asking me to build a life with him. Was any of it real? I asked the empty air. Did you love me? Or was I just part of the disguise? I'd asked variations of this question 100 times since October, lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the man I'd known with the man I'd discovered, the gentle farmer with the fugitive heir, the patient husband with the calculating whistleblower. But today, finally, I had my answer. It was all real. Robert had chosen this life. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He could have fled to another country, could have lived in luxury somewhere with no extradition treaty, could have started over as someone wealthy and powerful. Instead, he'd chosen Millbrook, chosen a farm, chosen me, not as a disguise, but as a destination. The lies about his past weren't lies about his present. Every moment we'd shared, every laugh and argument and quiet evening on the porch watching fireflies, those had been true. Robert Caldwell had been as real as James Whitmore, maybe more so, because he'd been chosen rather than inherited. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Daniel Torres approaching, his breath making clouds in the cold air. "Thought I might find you here," he said. We'd seen each other several times since the rescue. Statements to police, depositions for prosecutors, debriefings with federal agents. But this was the first time he'd come to the farm without official business. "How's Ben Morrison?" I asked. Last I heard, he was milking the hero story for all it's worth down at the diner. Torres grinned. "Told me yesterday he's thinking about writing his memoirs. The night I saved Brittany Caldwell from the Boston mob." I pointed out they weren't actually mob, but he said it sounded better. I laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Like maybe someday I'd be able to remember this whole nightmare with something other than terror and grief. "I wanted to tell you something," Torres said, his expression turning serious. "About your husband. About the man I got to know through investigating him. You never actually met him." "No. But I read everything he wrote, every journal entry, every note he left. I interviewed everyone who knew him as Robert Caldwell, and I spent 3 years trying to understand his choices." Torres looked out at the snow-covered fields. "He was extraordinary, Brittany. Not because he was brave, though he was. Not because he was smart, though he was that too. But because when he had to choose between justice and safety, between truth and comfort, he chose the harder path. Every single time. It cost him everything. It gave him everything too. A life with you. Children. Grandchildren. 43 years of peace. Knowing he'd done the right thing even if no one would ever know it." Torres met my eyes. He told his lawyer, Jennifer, that his only regret was that you'd have to learn the truth someday, that he'd hurt you with his secrets. He was more afraid of that than he'd ever been of Caroline or her people. Tears slipped down my cheeks, freezing in the January cold. I wish I could tell him I understand, that I forgive him. I think he knew. The way he talked about you in his journals, the way he planned to protect you, he knew you'd understand eventually, that your love was strong enough to survive the truth. Torres left soon after, and I stood alone in the barn for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and understanding and the difference between the two. That evening, Michael called. "Mom, I've been thinking about the farm." My chest tightened. We'd been avoiding this conversation for months, but it had to happen eventually. Michael had his own life, his own career. He couldn't take over the farm, and I was 63 years old, too old to manage it alone. "I know," I said quietly. "We'll need to sell it. Start looking for buyers in the spring." "That's not what I was going to say." Michael's voice was gentle. "Mom, I've been talking to Vanessa about priorities, about what matters, and I realized that for the past 10 years I've been chasing a career I don't even like, trying to impress people I don't respect, living in a house that doesn't feel like home. Michael, the farm is home. It always has been. And I want to come back, not to take over from you, but to work with you, to learn from you while I still can, to teach Emma where she comes from." Hope flared in my chest, almost painful in its intensity. "Are you sure? The farm doesn't make much money. It's hard work, long hours." "It's real," Michael interrupted. "It's honest. It's what both Dad and Grandpa would have wanted. A legacy that's about building something, not about running from something. We talked for another hour, making plans, discussing logistics. Vanessa had already started looking at local teaching positions. Emma was excited about horses and 4-H. They'd move back in March, give themselves time to settle before spring planting. After we hung up, I walked through the farmhouse, seeing it with new eyes. Not as a mausoleum of memories, but as a living space ready for new life. Emma's laughter would fill these rooms again. Michael's boots would track mud across the kitchen floor. The farm would continue, adapt, grow. That night, I pulled out Robert's letter, the one from the wooden box, and read it one final time. Brittany, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the lies. But most of all, I'm sorry for what you're about to discover. Our life together was real. My love for you was real. But my past was someone else's entirely. Burn everything in this box after you've read it. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't let them know you know. Your life may depend on it. R. I'd done the opposite of everything he'd asked, and we'd both survived. The secrets were public now. The truth exposed. Justice served. Not because I'd burned the evidence or stayed silent or protected myself, but because I'd fought back. I carried the letter to the fireplace and held it over the flames. One quick movement, and it would be gone. The last physical connection to that terrible October night when my world had shattered. But I didn't let go. Instead, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my jewelry box, next to my wedding ring and the locket Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. Not as a shrine to pain, but as a reminder. Love can contain contradictions. A person can be two things at once. Saint and sinner, hero and fugitive, husband and stranger. And sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone be complicated. Spring came early that year. By April, Michael and his family had moved into the renovated guest cottage on the east side of the property. Close enough to help, but far enough for privacy. We planted corn and soybeans together, Michael learning the rhythms of the land while Emma followed behind, asking endless questions about seeds and soil and growing things. Margaret Whitmore, Robert's sister, visited in May. She was elegant and kind, with the same eyes as her brother, the same quick smile. She brought photograph albums from their childhood, stories of the boy who'd become my husband, memories of a person I'd never known. He was always brave, she told me over tea in the kitchen. Even as a child, he'd stand up to bullies, defend the weak, never back down from what he thought was right. It cost him friends sometimes, cost him peace, but he couldn't be any other way. He never mentioned you, I said quietly. I'm sorry. I know that must hurt. He was protecting me. If Caroline or her people had known he had a sister he loved, they'd have used me to get to him. Margaret touched my hand. He sacrificed everything, Brittany. His name, his family, his entire identity. But he gained something too. You. And I can see in this house, in this land, in your children, that it was worth it. We cried together, two women mourning the same man from different angles. And afterward, I felt lighter, more complete. The foundation opened its doors in June. We funded 3 investigations into corporate fraud, helped 12 families left destitute by financial crimes, and established a scholarship for children of whistleblowers. The board met quarterly in the farmhouse, and I watched Robert's vision become reality, one case at a time. Caroline's trial began in July. I sat in the courtroom every day for 3 weeks, listening to prosecutors lay out 43 years of crimes. She never looked at me, not once. But I looked at her, seeing not the powerful philanthropist or the bitter ex-fiancé, but a woman who'd made terrible choices and lived with their consequences. When the guilty verdict came, I felt no triumph, only a deep, weary sadness that so many lives had been destroyed. James's, Caroline's, the victims of their shared past. On the courthouse steps afterward, a reporter asked me how I felt. I feel like justice was served, I said, and I feel grateful that I get to go home to a life that's real. August brought the harvest. And with it, a sense of rhythm and purpose I hadn't felt since before Robert died. Working alongside Michael in the fields, teaching Emma to drive the tractor, watching Vanessa plan her first school year at Millbrook Elementary, it all felt like pieces clicking into place. One evening, as the sun set over the corn, turning everything gold and green and perfect, Emma asked me if I was happy. I thought about the question, about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained, about the lies that had protected me and the truths that had freed me. Yes, I said finally. I think I am. Even after everything that happened, because of everything that happened, I pulled her close. Your grandfather taught me that we can survive anything if we're brave enough to face the truth, and that sometimes the most important truths are the simplest ones. Love is real, family matters, and home is where we choose to build it. Emma leaned against me, and we watched the sunset together. 3 generations of women standing on land that had been cultivated by lies and watered by truth. And I understood finally what Robert had known all along. We are not defined by our secrets, but by what we choose to do with them. We are not imprisoned by our past, but freed by our choices. And love, real, complicated, imperfect love, is the only truth that matters. The farm would continue, the foundation would grow, the family would heal, and I would live the rest of my days not as the woman who'd been deceived, but as the woman who'd discovered that strength doesn't come from never being broken. It comes from choosing to rebuild. Robert had taught me that. James had taught me that. The man I'd loved, whoever he'd been, had left me one final gift, the knowledge that I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. That evening, I stood on the porch watching fireflies dance across the darkening fields, and I whispered into the summer air, "Thank you for everything, for the lies that kept me safe and the truth that set me free, for 41 years of love, however complicated, for teaching me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply choose to live authentically." The fireflies rose up like tiny stars, and for just a moment, I could almost believe he heard me. Then I turned and walked back into the farmhouse, my home, my sanctuary, my legacy, and closed the door on the past. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a very long time, I was ready to meet it. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.